Today on The Necessary Entrepreneur, we have a special guest joining us, a remarkable individual whose talents transcend genres and inspire creativity in unexpected ways. I'm thrilled to introduce to you a true luminary in the world of bluegrass music, Joe Mullins. Joe is the only person in the history of bluegrass music to be awarded Album of the Year, Radio Broadcaster of the Year, Entertainer of the Year, and Event of the Year from the International Bluegrass Music Association. Joe's a second-generation radio broadcaster. His father, Paul Moon Mullins, created a legacy in Southwest Ohio and is a member of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame. Joe owns a network of radio stations called Real Roots Radio. You can find out more at realrootsradio.com. Joe is a member of the full-time touring band Joe Mullins and the Radio Ramblers, and an event producer. In 2021, Joe produced the 16-track all-star album titled Industrial Strength Bluegrass. That project has just expanded to a double LP released May 3rd with 7 additional tracks from the original artist. During the conversation, Joe talks about his humble beginnings, the importance of family, the Appalachian Migration, buying AM radio stations in the mid-90s, the difference between a broadcaster and a DJ, which was very interesting, and how authenticity still works. He also talks about anxiety while performing, being a regular guest on the Grand Ole Opry, getting big-name stars together to produce an album of traditional bluegrass music, again, this awesome one, and leaving behind a legacy. Stick around until the end when Joe talks about resurrecting the right attitude, an awesome conversation. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Give us a like, hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on future guests right here on The Necessary Entrepreneur. You can find out more about Joe Mullins and the Radio Ramblers on social media, and if you're near Wilmington, Ohio, this November in 2024, be sure to check out the Industrial Strength Bluegrass Festival. Thanks again.
Why is a real estate mogul fooling around with a podcast
just trying
about
to
a banjo player?
I think, wow, that's a way to get it started off. The guest asked the question. So here's the premise of the podcast. I'll go through it quick because I never want it to be about me. But I'm sitting here in 2024, 45 years old. Grew up, I try to say it's normal. I think I had the same struggle that a lot of kids have. I grew up in a way that you would appreciate, not so much anymore, but I grew up very conservative, very traditional, poor in Boone County in Kentucky, just 20 minutes away from here. And grew up with just an awesome mom who set she set an example for me and my 3 other siblings. I'm the youngest. I act like it sometimes. An example for us on just how to do life, every part of it. And she didn't make any of it look like a struggle, but man, I tell you what. And our dad just wasn't a good guy, just wasn't. He tried to make it appear so at times, and too much alcohol, too much living life the way you're not supposed to when you have a wife and kids and a family. And boy, it was a hypocritical environment because we grew up very conservative, very religious, and he just wasn't living the same life. And so, but she somehow protected us in it. And still, while working, she was a nurse. She was educated with a college degree. He wasn't. How in the world they ever got together, I don't know. But I think many of us have stories that are similar. I don't think mine's any more difficult than the average person. Maybe not any easier than that. And I just know where I came from. I did college very non-traditional. Started for a year. Worked a corporate job. Came back. Took night classes. So I think my life wasn't set on this path from when I'm 6 or 8 or 10 years old. I knew what I was going to do. I think it's just a normal journey of so many humans.
Yeah.
And most people would now look at me and say, wow, how successful. I guess you have to factor in how you determine success.
Yeah.
Right. But we are doing big things. I have a real estate company with close to 200 realtors and own commercial real estate. And if you're from a monetary standpoint, yeah, success. but I think life is so much more.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, and as I wrap that up, since I feel like I've lived a normal life the way 60 or 70 or 80% of us have to, and we come up, we got to figure it out. So many people, it became apparent to me, don't know that big things are possible. They don't wake up every day and believe and know and have faith. Hey, if you just do some things the right way, work hard, there's going to be some failure. You're going to have a lot of adversity. Just keep going. And I know there's a lot of stories out here like mine, whether you're a businessman that's framed as a bluegrass artist. You can do a lot of business. And there's so many people, I say, let's sit down and have conversations to show everybody out there who's struggling. Just keep going. You can get through it. Whether you choose to be an employee, an entrepreneur, you can do really big things in your life and make an impact in the world in many different ways. And I knew that's what this was going to become.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to sit down with a lot of smart people and hear their stories, and then at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of people that can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. That's
so what am I doing here?
We're going to – it's, when I think Dave we're about to hit our 100th episode. A lot of people start podcasts.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to 100.
Yeah.
I think I was talking to one of the top podcasters in the country a few days ago, and he said it's under 1% of the podcasts that start get to 100.
Wow.
And I think now Dave is starting, he schedules, he produces, and so I think he slipped in an awesome musician on me is what happened.
Have you monetized this?
Facebook pays us a couple pennies, but not any big dollars at all.
Yeah. I'm asking because my son, I don't know how close he is to 100. He's got maybe 3 seasons that are pretty strong out. Daniel, my son, he's a good broadcaster, good journalist, good interviewer. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of energy. He started a podcast for the bluegrass music industry.
What's the name of it?
Walls of Time Bluegrass Podcast. I don't know if he's made it to 100 yet. But I, as an entrepreneur, as a guy that's been self-sustaining and self-employed for 40 years, I'm looking at, okay, son, you're pouring in hundreds of hours and, several $1,000s annually with your time and your expenses to produce this, and you're not getting a return on your investment. So I think the majority of podcasts are a labor of love, unless you're Joe Rogan, I guess.
Yeah. But what I would say to Daniel, I'm assuming he's a little bit younger than me.
He's 32.
What I would say to him is, hey, Daniel, just keep going. Because I'm assuming you love him and your daughter next to your wife more than any other people in the world.
That's a fact.
It's going to be another addition to that soon.
Yeah.
A grandchild. But what I've learned about parents is that they want great things for us, but parents do lose track of the risks that they took in their 20s and 30s when everybody was questioning them too. And so if you just chart a course, maintain the path, you're probably not going to end up where you planned.
Yeah.
But if you keep going, there's some good stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so if he keeps going on the podcast, I can't tell you what this is going to be in 5 years, but as long as we keep going, it's going to be something good.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
That's a good attitude, Mark.
Yeah, I think.
Your attitude determines your altitude.
Isn't that it? Oh, see, this is going to be good. I knew this was going to be good. So how in the world, so now the question for you. How in the world does Joe go through the past 40 years? You had an awesome, I'm assuming, mentor in your father who was in Bluegrass, Paul. You said his nickname was Moon.
Yeah.
I want to hear the story around that later.
There's a couple different ones.
Give us the best one.
Okay.
But he's in the International Bluegrass Hall of Fame, I think.
Yes.
All right. And then you're sitting here today having conversations. We're going to talk about an album, you guys, that you produced in 2021. You're the producer of a music festival that's tied in with this now, too. You travel. You have over 100 event dates throughout the country every year.
And a little less than that. We did over 100 a few years ago, but
yeah,
we're all getting a little older and a little lazier.
I don't know, though, because in May,
choose a little bit.
In May, you're going to be in Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
What's the past 40 years look like? How in the world do you get here?
Oh, a labor of love. I heard my dad use those words together a long time ago. We started a band when I turned 18 years old. Dad combined fiddle playing and broadcasting. He was very, very passionate about both, very good at both. They went hand in hand. I saw that. I saw he always had a crowd to play to, no matter what kind of a band he was on stage with, whether he was a side man filling in with a good act or he was leading a good band onto a stage. If he was within 100 miles of Middletown, Ohio, there was a heck of a crowd there because he was on radio every day. So I saw that formula working successfully for my dad. But we hit the road right after I turned 18 with a band that we put together, played regionally heavy for several years, and then got to traveling very extensively by the late 80s and through the early 90s. And I heard him say the words, a labor of love, a lot. Our family never went without anything, but Dad never was wealthy. Putting together his two passions, he made a living. But you put in a lot of miles and a lot of hours for meager earnings often. He wasn't a starving artist because he had dual talents. He was good on stage, he was a good musician, but he was a great broadcaster just by being himself.
Authenticity, we hear that word a lot now.
Man, he was inside out. And he was very blessed to have that be his shining star when he hit Middletown, Ohio, in his prime. And I say that because one of the main reasons we're sitting here chatting today is because of the Appalachian Migration. Post-World War II saw tens of thousands of families leave all the hills and the hollers in Kentucky and West Virginia and East Tennessee and East Virginia. Eastern Kentucky particularly, there was a mass evacuation for people heading north to get good jobs. Thankfully, thousands of them landed in Cincinnati and Dayton and all of the region that had industry just booming. And the LP that I brought you today, the 2 LP set, Industrial Strength Bluegrass, Southwestern Ohio's Musical Legacy, those pictures on the front and back are from the Historical Society in Middletown. That's Armco Steel in the 1940s. And I think it's even documented at one time, Armco even marketed jobs to Eastern Kentucky and bussed hillbillies, briar hoppers, whatever you wanted to call them. They bussed people out of the mountains to come to Middletown and work.
For jobs.
For jobs. Dad never worked a day in a factory, but as a passionate musician and broadcaster who honed his skills in the late 50s and early 60s at both, he created demand and knew the culture a little bit in Middletown. He had some friends that had already made that migration, some friends and family. And the radio station in Middletown, Ohio, was kind of an anchor part of the country music business. That station went on the air in the late 40s, and they had presented live music on radio back in then. Before there were disc jockeys, you had a Saturday night jamboree with hillbilly music on it. That's how the Grand Ole Opry started. And the station in Middletown had featured Hank Williams and Bill Monroe and Little Jimmy Dickens. All these Nashville cats had been stopping in little old Middletown, Ohio. And a whole gang of guys that went on to be Bluegrass Hall of Fame members that were Appalachian migrants, also started in the same spot. So you go up to 1964, and that's when my dad and mom migrated from Eastern Kentucky to Middletown. I was born a year later. And so I saw my dad hit his stride when I was a kid, as a broadcaster and as an entertainer. And he was just being himself when he was on the radio. And he found a ready-made audience here. So,
and maybe the moon was shining on him. Is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, just a couple different stories. Paul Mullins, oldest of 6 kids, born in Menifee County, Kentucky. A little bitty poor spot. There's not a 4-lane road through Menifee County, Kentucky. Between Mount Sterling and West Liberty along U.S. Route 460. Just a small county. And Dad used to say Frenchburg, Kentucky is the only town in the county. That's where he graduated high school in 1955. And he said, it's the place is so small, everybody just takes turns being the town drunk. He had all kinds of little sayings, being a mountaineer that he was. But that's where he grew up.
Where do you think he got his personality from? Because he probably had one. I'm sure he had charisma. If he was good on the radio, there were some things built in there. Wonder who was his influence. Have you heard those stories? Did he have, I think, was he influenced by somebody playing music? Was it his father? Was it a great-grandfather, you think?
No. There wasn't any musicians in his family.
He was the first.
He told stories about hearing the radio and hearing the jukebox when he was a kid. He saw Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys live on the courthouse steps in Frenchburg, Kentucky when he was about 14 or 15 years old. And he said it absolutely warped his mind. He said, that's something I want to do.
What do you think it is about that? You hear a story like that from so many people. They just heard something one time. You hear it from musicians. They hear it one time, and that was it. What do you think that is?
I don't know. He had stories about going into the pool room and the diner in Frenchburg, Kentucky when he was a high school kid. And he had stories about how it smelled and how it felt in there. And when Hank Snow started playing I'm Moving On the jukebox, he would stand there and hold that jukebox and feel that music. And it just absolutely overwhelmed him. And he learned guitar a little bit as a kid and left Kentucky via the U.S. Army in the summer of 55. And he wound up in Alaska before statehood. The armed forces put the telecommunications and everything across the Alaskan territory, and he was part of that. And he said, but you can only work, half the year. He said the other half of the year he fell in with a couple of hillbilly bands playing the honky-tonks and NCO clubs or whatever up there. And he developed a passion for learning the fiddle. And so a couple of years in Alaska with a couple of other good fiddlers, one from North Carolina, one from South Georgia, and a stack of records by Flatt and Scruggs and the Stanley Brothers. And he walked the floor with a fiddle up there for a couple of years and got a job playing fiddle when he got out of the Army.
What's so unique and different from a guitar and a fiddle? So if he started strumming a guitar, because that's usually what kids do, they pick up a guitar, got one for their birthday or something. What's the difference?
Huge difference.
Explain it to the layman.
One of the main things is a guitar has frets, and it gives you a place to put your fingers to make the note that you desire to make. And if a guitar is in tune, you put your finger, on the third string at the third fret. It's going to be the same every time. Fiddle doesn't have any. Its neck is only about 10% as long as a fiddle, or 20% anyway, and there's no frets on it. And it's strictly, you have to have an ear and a feel for that fiddle. And you don't pluck the string. It's
like a violin, right?
You push that bow across. Yeah, same instrument.
It's a brother and sister.
Exact same instrument.
It's exactly the same.
Yes. It's how you play it.
A bluegrass musician just plays it different.
Well, I've also heard a violin has strings, a fiddle has strings.
There's the difference, right?
Stylistically, that's the only difference in a fiddle and a violin. Now, a fiddle player is often will play two strings at once. A violinist principally plays one string at a time. There's all kinds of little technical things like that, but the instruments are the same.
Can you get away with a lot when you're playing two strings versus one?
No,
it's harder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you note two strings at once, both notes have to be exact, or it's sour.
Oof. Okay.
So
there's some skill going on when you hear the fiddle players just going off.
Oh, I'm amazed. I'm amazed at great fiddle players, and I've been blessed to be friends and work beside some great fiddle players, and the fiddle really blows my mind. I started learning to play the guitar as a kid, was a decent rhythm guitar player to follow my dad on fiddle tunes by the time I was 10 or 12 years old. Became infatuated with the banjo when I was about 13. I went head over heels with playing the 5-string banjo in the style of Earl Scruggs. And
where'd the banjo come from? Some shack on a hill in eastern Kentucky?
No, Africa.
That's where the banjo came from.
Yeah, and a rudimentary African instrument, I think, called the banjar, wound up in North America, unfortunately, with the slave trade.
Yep.
And was principally, I think, a 4-string instrument for quite a while.
It became 5.
But it was played a lot,
What did that 5th string do? What was the addition to the 5th string?
A drone, pretty much a drone. It's not noted nearly as often as the other 4 strings are. It was added, I think, in the late 1800s. And still, there was 5-string and 4-string. The 5-string did not develop commercially in a big way until the country music business of the 30s and 40s. And Scruggs was not the first, but he was the first to have the spotlight of the Grand Ole Opry and national radio and national recordings when he went to work for Bill Monroe at the end of 1945.
I was about to say Earl Scruggs or Bill Monroe.
Earl Scruggs went to work for Bill Monroe at the end of 1945, and he was heard on nationwide radio and nationwide recordings throughout 46, 47. And that changed everything about the banjo. The five-string banjo played in the three-finger style that he captured the world with is what we've all followed.
If we go into eastern Kentucky now, Menifee County, a lot of these other counties, Hazard, all these places, would we still feel a massive influence of a banjo and bluegrass and a fiddle?
No.
Hmm.
No.
It all left.
It didn't necessarily all leave, but bluegrass has boomed where it's been broadcast and promoted. The Washington, D.C. area has a whole lot more bluegrass fans than eastern Kentucky. Southwestern Ohio has just as many or more bluegrass fans than eastern Kentucky. Plus, some of those areas in eastern Kentucky are still very impoverished.
Yeah.
And they haven't accessed, what a whole lot of other cultures have really grasped onto.
You're probably a good person to answer the question and to have a conversation around the poverty in eastern Kentucky. People talk about it, but I don't think they really know. You as a part of you giving back and your philanthropy, you have a prison ministry program you're a part of in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, in Ohio.
Right. But that's similar, right? If you're a person that does that and you care about philanthropy and helping people live better lives no matter where they're at or where they come from, I'm sure you can probably speak to this too. You're closer since the bluegrass industry and business. There's massive poverty in eastern Kentucky and levels that I don't think we can comprehend unless you've been there a lot.
Yeah. That's my family is from eastern Kentucky. I'm not there often, and I've got some cousins that have done really well. I've got other family members that have struggled for a lifetime. My wife, same way. Her family roots are from eastern Tennessee.
It's the same type of thing. It's the same people, the same cultures.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a big awakening in the early 80s. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio. My dad was a radio broadcaster there, an entertainer. But he was a hard-headed hillbilly that did things his way. And by the early 80s, he had a lot of controversy with the management and ownership of the radio station in Middletown, Ohio. And he would tell them what they could do with their radio station every now and then, and they would tell him where to go. And it was, out the door.
To the moon.
Yep. And our family, he left the radio station in Middletown in the spring of 81. And by December of 81, our family picked up and moved to Jellicoe, Tennessee, right on the state line.
Right. Isn't there a Jellicoe, Kentucky and Tennessee?
Yeah, it straddles the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was right in the middle of my sophomore year of high school, and we go to Jellicoe, Tennessee. Well, I was a redneck hillbilly kid. I'd spent summers in Kentucky with my grandparents and my cousins. This will be great. I can get along with anybody. And I did. I still have a couple of lifelong friends or friends since my high school. We picked up and moved down there. But going from a high school where I would have graduated with a class of 280-some kids to Jellicoe High School, was graduated with 91 kids. It was smaller. But the poverty level, not just of the population, but of the school district, was one of the most dramatic things I had never seen like that in my life. In 1982, we got sent home from school a couple of days because they ran out of coal for the furnace. That didn't happen in Middletown, Ohio, or Franklin, Ohio, the school district I was in when we moved. And I went to school with kids in the early 80s in the middle of Appalachia in Jellicoe that still didn't have indoor plumbing in 1982. So
what'd that do for you? Going through experiences like that, what'd that do for Joe?
It makes you thankful for what you have, but it also is a light bulb moment to say, the there's still a lot of poverty in Appalachia. I went down that path because of the question you asked.
It's tough. I was talking to somebody a few days ago because a lot of us are so fortunate to just have awesome lives. We pay too much attention to the struggle, I think. We pay too much attention to all the adversity. The previous generations, this world they've built for us, and the opportunity we have is tremendous. And, boy, it is easy to lose perspective.
Yeah. We could talk about my dad's accomplishments as a fiddler and a broadcaster, and he's in the Bluegrass Hall of Fame and all this kind of stuff. But for me, to be as blessed as I've been and raise my kids, and they've never wanted for anything. And I grew up, I never went without a meal. I never went without a warm bed. We always had a home. But knowing where my dad was born, I've been there. I've got pictures in my office of just a little 2-room shack that's still barely standing that is miles off of a blacktop road back in the woods where my dad was born in 1936. And to grow up and have my dad, tell me the stories and realize with the closeness I had with his parents, he didn't have electricity until he was in about the time he started elementary school. And they didn't have indoor plumbing and heating when he left in 1955 to go to the Army. He talked about that a lot. He said, the day I left in June of 55 to go to the Army, I cut my mom a load of stove wood that morning. Stove wood meaning she cooked over a wood-burning stove still in 1955.
Do you ever think about, do you have moments, as good as life is and all the traveling and everything you do, you have moments of just thinking, man, what would it be to go back now and take a banjo, sit on the front porch of one of those cabins? There's something appealing about that thought.
Yeah.
And just stay there for a little while.
Yeah. To me, what's appealing is, banjo or not, is getting off the grid where you don't hear all of the controversy and griping and problems of people just fighting over the greed of everything.
Because it doesn't have to be as difficult as we're making it.
No.
It doesn't have to be.
No.
Yeah. It seems way more difficult than when I was growing up in the 80s. I remember you had a few options on evening news at 7 o'clock. You had Peter Jennings, Dan Brokaw, or Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, and Peter Jennings.
Yeah. I grew up when Cronkite was still on.
Right. So I'm one past you, I think, right?
Yeah.
And there just wasn't all the infighting and all the I have to be right. I don't know what those guys' politics were, but it sure felt a lot easier and more simple then.
Yeah, it felt simple.
So you operate some radio stations. There's the entrepreneur, huh?
Yeah. Buy a pile of broke down AM radio stations and resurrect them good enough to employ a few talented people and get some kids through college and survive it all. So very, very fortunate in that regard. Spent the early 90s on the road full-time as a musician, doing some part-time radio around the greater Cincinnati area. But had the opportunity to buy a local AM radio station in Xenia, Ohio in the spring of 1995. And bought a local AM station in Xenia, Ohio, and rebuilt it. Went to Clinton County and bought Wilmington's radio station, did the same thing. Went out to Preble County, Ohio, to Eaton, and bought a local AM station, did the same thing. Went up with a little network of 3 local AM radio stations. And over the last 15 years, FCC regulations and deregulations have allowed local AM stations to buy FM translators to where you can get, 250 watts to cover your county of license on the FM dial, while having 3 AM spots, wound up with 3 FM channels to accompany those. And when you sew it all together, it's a little jigsaw puzzle that covers, pretty effective coverage for about 10 counties in southwestern Ohio, all the greater Dayton area, and all the farmland east and west of Dayton. We're there. And plus FM gives you coverage in your local area early in the mornings when AM just gets beat to death, low power AM does. And all the AM stations are daytime only. And so FM 24/7, 365 in a pretty good neighborhood.
What was the goal when you bought that first one in Xenia, Ohio in 1995? What was the plan?
Survive. It's completely.
That was honestly like, let me just survive. Let me do this.
Survive. Let me learn how to create programming that will serve enough advertisers that I can pay all the bills and have something left over.
Why do it then? If you knew in the beginning it's just survive, then why do it?
Well, the passion for bluegrass and traditional country music was part of that. There wasn't an outlet to hear the kind of music that I liked the best and the kind of music that I knew a great portion of the Miami Valley of Ohio wanted to hear on radio. It wasn't there anywhere. So a little scratchy AM station out of Xenia is better than nothing. And I knew that if you attract the right audience, they'll be loyal enough to support your sponsors and your advertisers. I'd seen my dad do that for my whole life. I had done it in small ways. I grew up working on radio. While we were in Jellicoe, Tennessee in the early 80s, we'd been there a month and a month and a half maybe. It was late January, I think. Dad says he was general manager programming the local AM station in Jellicoe, Tennessee. And he said, I need somebody on Saturdays. You start February 7th. I was 16 years old, and I've been on radio more than off since February of 1982.
On that Saturday. Was it even a question when you were 16 on that Saturday when your dad said, I need somebody on Saturday? Was it even a question in your mind or an option to say no?
No, I wanted to do it. I'd hung around the radio station in Middletown growing up, had done odd jobs there before I could even drive, and was in and out of the studio constantly.
Just looking for a shot.
And I'd heard him every day of my life on radio. And I couldn't do what he did. I figured that out after I had done a variety of things at radio stations. And, I'm a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, not in poverty. And I couldn't tell the stories he told. I couldn't be who he was. And, a few times when we're immature and we say things that don't fit, at least the light bulb went off and says, you got to be who you are. You can't be him.
That's a growth mindset. We talk so much in business these days about you either have a growth or a fixed mindset. And it seems like the folks with the growth mindsets are just looking to get better. And even if that means being wrong, that's okay. That fixed mindset, you just want to stay where you're at to be safe, not grow. Don't let anybody point out your weaknesses or what you're doing wrong. You were self-aware enough back then before we were talking about these things. Growth mindset, fixed mindset, self-awareness, emotional intelligence. You just knew something happened to you. I'm sure that 18, 21, 22, that ain't working for me.
Yeah.
I have to do a little something different.
Yeah.
Was that threatening at all? Did you have to work through that as a young guy?
Yeah, somewhat. Somewhat. I had to be who I was. I had a great platform because of who he was, but I had to be who I was. It really came full circle after I bought my first radio station. I was only 29, and people say, how did you make it? If you go into debt over your eyelids when you're 29, you'll get up early and you'll work late. That's all I knew how to do.
Or you'll throw in the towel and not do it ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll learn. You'll either learn a hard lesson or you'll create a way. You find a way.
Yeah. I'm sure back then you didn't have the statement that you said when we kicked off here. Your attitude determines your altitude.
Yeah.
I'm sure the 29-year-old Joe, that sentence wasn't in your brain.
It came pretty soon after that because I'll put it this way. You can't look around at what you don't have and be satisfied and be successful. You look around at what do I have? What can I do well? Can I do the right things for the right reasons consistently and find a way that provides a benefit to somebody else that'll pay me to do what I do.
You said when you had that radio station, just survive. And you said if you put out a good enough product and around that would support advertisers, the loyal listeners would support those advertisers.
Yeah, that's simple.
Comes down to sales, doesn't it?
Yes, and I had to show up at every Chamber of Commerce breakfast and every goat roping at every county fair and shake hands and hug necks and kiss babies for the first several years.
$25 and $50 at a time.
Yes, constantly, and I still do a whole lot of that, and that doesn't bother me.
If you knew what you were going to have to do in the beginning, the depth of the commitment and sacrifice, do you think you still would have done it?
Yeah, I knew what it was going to be, and Dad had been a successful broadcaster, a broadcast personality. He never was a disc jockey. He hated that. He hated that moniker.
What's the difference?
A broadcast personality has something to say and says it consistently and professionally, and with their own personality shining through, and they can make people want to listen to them regardless of what else is on the air.
And kind of regardless of what they do say or how they say it, because those principles and that values are going to come through every day.
Yeah,
the thing they believe and the thing they're passionate about.
Yes, he was passionate about being himself and inserting himself into stories about his advertisers, his sponsors, and about the music that he was programming.
Versus a disc jockey, the shock jock type of thing.
Yeah, they're just connecting the dots with the music they're playing.
Yeah,
that was more than that.
So it comes down to sales. So do you think you were a natural salesperson?
I developed, and if you're hungry, you'll learn how to sell. And I had to sell. It was sink or swim, and I learned how to do that. And I saw him do that. And but I started to say, Dad was a broadcast personality and a darn good one, and did things his way. So he succeeded. He never owned a radio station. He never had to be the man to employ other people. And have them depend on him for a paycheck. He never went into debt up to his eyelids while he had two toddlers to try to figure out how to survive. He went through a whole lot of other struggles. He had to overcome things. He had to show up with a white shirt and a tie and still get called a hillbilly and still prove him that he was the smartest hillbilly of the bunch.
You still smile.
Yeah.
With a good attitude.
Well, he didn't always do that. He'd tell you exactly what he thought.
He got the fists out every once in a while.
He couldn't hide what was on his mind very easily at all. And
he still found a way authentically.
Yeah. But he never had the responsibility of learning how to get along with the insurance company and with the FCC and all the little things you have to do to own a small business. And it's a small business. I don't want our audience to think that, that I'm some broadcast mogul. It's a small business. I carved out a way to be part of the neighborhood and create programming that was unique enough to still be live on air all day, every day, and have some income every quarter hour. That's hard to do.
I bet I'm not going too far out on a limb here to say that you're really passionate about putting out this form of music on the stations that you think makes people, the country, the area probably better. Am I going out on a limb?
No.
There's some passion there for that.
Well, there's also, I've joked to audiences all over the country that I figured this out. If you want to have your music played on the radio, the easiest way is to buy a station.
There you go. There you go. Build it and they will come, I guess.
Well, build it and they will come. Yeah. The easiest way to make certain that bluegrass music is heard in prime time is to own the radio station. I've joked about that a lot, but
it's true.
It's worked.
We had a guy, he's not in your form of country music, but he believes he's the original type of country music, a guy named Bobby Mackey locally.
Oh, I know Bobby.
So we actually went out to his place. They just shut it down. They're going to rebuild it or something. We went out there and did an off-site interview with him. And probably 6 months ago. I do what? October. So he said the same thing. He said, I could have gone to Nashville and competed with all those people and maybe, I think I'm paraphrasing, but maybe never have been seen regardless of talent. But if I wanted to be able to play my music and get on the stage every night, I needed to build the place.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar attitude and perspective. So the question then is, what's the hardest part? What's the hardest part of this business endeavor, the venture, and being an employer, dealing with the FCC, dealing with banks, debt out over your skis and eyeballs? Is there one thing that stands out that was the toughest for Joe, either one time or consistently you had to deal with being a business operator and entrepreneur?
Shutting it off and being a dad, being a husband, not being a businessman and a broadcaster and a salesperson all the time. And
can you? Because a lot of people say they're searching for that balance, but doing everything you do, what I say is there's no balance. You got to find a way for it all to fit together.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would put it.
It's hard. That's one of the hardest things is to shut it all off, not let it drive you nuts. The responsibility, or be in the moment. If I'm taking my kid fishing, or be in the moment if my wife and I are out with friends going to dinner, and and I've not done it well all the time.
How supportive?
Just ask her.
How supportive has she been through?
Oh, amazing. I mean, that's another thing. If you're going to be a musician, or you're going to be a small-time entrepreneur, you marry up. And when I decided to...
What a smart man.
She was in college. I was working, 2 dead-end jobs, and we got married 37 years ago. She finished college. I was able to go on the road full-time because she was an RN with a bachelor's degree, and we had benefits.
I thought you were about to say when you decided. I was like, come on, Joe. She's the one that decided.
Yeah. Well, when I first went into business, bought the radio station.
Yeah.
I came off of a full-time tour schedule as a banjo player, and just threw everything into recreating a local radio station that people would pay attention to in Greene County, Ohio.
What'd that sales pitch sound like at home? Like, hey, honey, I got an idea.
No, it was a God thing. I had wound up in a real dark place on the road. Just the winter of 94, 95, I was a dead man walking. I wasn't handling anything right. And God got me by the shirt collar and said, you can keep doing things your way and die young, or put me first, and you'll have not only eternal life, but a better life right now. And so I had a wonderful conversion in March of 1995. And next thing I know, within 60 days, there was the opportunity to own a radio station and get off the road. So there was no arguing with God from where I stood at the time. And it certainly turned her world upside down. But I said, okay, if God's in it, it won't fail. And it didn't. I was on the road playing the Texas State Bluegrass Festival in June of 1995. I was going to assume all responsibilities for the local radio station in Xenia, Ohio, July 1st of 1995. The station hadn't made a dime in years. It was upside down. There wasn't enough income. It was in the red. And it was going to cost out of my pocket, regardless of anything else going on. That first month, just for me to put the key in the door and keep it on the air, the first month was going to cost $4,000. And I had a new banjo that I was endorsing, and I had an old antique Gibson banjo. And I put that old Gibson banjo on the table, the merchandise table for our band at the Texas State Bluegrass Festival in June of 95. And I wrote for sale on it. And a guy walks up and says, what is it? And I told him what year it was made, the model it was. And he said, bring it over to my car. He was a plumber from Louisiana. He counted out $4,000, and that's what I went into business with.
And the rest of it's on faith and commitment.
Yeah. Grace and guts. That's what I always say. And so, I started business July 1st. And the station had a Christian format. It wasn't programmed very well at all. It was a hodgepodge of music and ministry. And I took all that off. I thought, well, okay, do a format change on July the 4th because the audience is lower. And you can make a major change in radio and ease into it, okay? So I took off all kinds of ministry programs and all kinds of Christian music, and I put on, Buck Owens and George Jones alongside, hit bluegrass. And the phone didn't ring for about 2 weeks. That means there wasn't one listener. There was nobody listening to the radio station in Xenia, Ohio in July of 95. Nobody cared that I had turned the format upside down, inside out. And I took off what had been there for a couple of years, put on something totally different. Nobody noticed.
You're going to launch a new station.
Pretty much.
There you go.
Yeah. I get some business cards made and went into the busiest Marathon station, I think, busiest gas station in town. I thought, well, I'm going to be out trying to meet everybody in the county and create a radio product here. I've got to buy gas every week. I'll see if I can get a trade, barter account, or sell some ads to the guy at the local radio, at the local marathon station.
I bet you made a sale right there.
Back then, they were service stations. He had 2 bays. They're doing a mechanic, and so I go in and meet the head honcho at the local gas station. Hello, Mr. Adams. I'm Joe Mullins. I just bought the radio station in Xenia. He said, I didn't know there was a radio station in Xenia. That's where I started, completely from ground zero.
So what's the message for that new entrepreneur, that new business person that's starting out day one right then? July 4th of this year, somebody's going to start a business.
Yeah.
What's the message?
If you know that you have the ability to deliver a product, to deliver a service that will be of benefit, if you believe in yourself, you can get other people to believe in you. I still believe that. If you do the right things for the right reasons consistently, and you believe in yourself, you can get other people to believe in you too.
What was going through your head those 2 weeks when nobody's listening? You bought the radio station. You got another $4,000 coming in August you're going to have to lay on the table somehow.
Oh, I was digging through credit cards, and I still had some musicians' income. And praise God, I still have my wife was a full-time RN still at that time.
Boy, it just keeps on coming back around about marrying up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She did good things.
Those RNs.
Yeah.
That was my mom, too.
Yeah.
Did good things. So this album we're looking at here, you guys put it out. So you produced it.
Yeah.
And you have a little bit of music yourself on here. You and the, what is it, the Radio Ramblers?
Yeah.
As I walked in the station today, what's it like for me and you just met? You're a very humble guy. It's this weird combination of accomplishment and humble. You probably won't let me get away with the accomplishment thing too much because guys that have the right sense of humility don't. They want to talk about everybody else. But I walked in and I played a song. What's that feel like for me and you never to have met?
Mm-hmm.
And I pull up my streaming account. It happens to be Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm playing a song that 145,000 people have played. I don't know if you knew that number, but on Spotify they have. What's that feel like? Is there any feeling?
Oh, it's a blessing. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to create music that somebody else likes and have a record label and a publicist and somebody to make certain that it's heard. There's a lot of great music that, will never get heard by more than a few hundred or a few thousand people. And that's a very, very small number, 145,000.
That's on one song.
Well, I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I can say is grateful. Because, I remember it's only been, 45 years ago. I'm a 13-year-old kid sitting in my bedroom with a banjo, sitting there with LPs and 45s and 78s and every recording I get my hands on by the people that really lit a fire in me. And I'm just trying to learn how to do this. And I can still remember, the first time you're on stage and people, clap for you. It's worse than cocaine. I guess I've never.
I was going to say, Joe, do we need to talk about something here? I mean, something we need to know about those 94 and 95 days? I mean, So that's the first time you're on stage where there's knees shaking, or no? You had already gotten through that because your dad and on the radio, and
I was a kid. I was on stage with my dad and the band he was with, and it was there's anxiety.
Yeah,
and I still get it sometimes, and I think if you get to where you don't respect the opportunity and the situation, it could be a danger zone there. Not that you're going to fail as an artist or anything, but I'm still glad that you can be excited. Not every night and not every audience, but you can still anticipate it. Our band started playing the Grand Ole Opry as a guest in 2013. That's the biggest stage I've ever been on, still is. And it's still extremely humbling and exciting all at the same time to get to do stages like that.
What's it feel like? Ryman Theater? Is that it?
We did the Ryman Auditorium I'd been on the Ryman as a banjo artist with a couple different bands. The Radio Ramblers played the Ryman first in 2011. The Ryman was the home of the Grand Ole Opry when it peaked in the 40s and 50s and 60s. The current Grand Ole Opry house, where the broadcast is produced, is out east of downtown Nashville. The Ryman was all refurbished and restored 25, 30 years ago. And
just doesn't fit that many people, right? I mean,
it's small.
Yeah.
It's small compared. It's about half the size of the Grand Ole Opry house. But playing there, where the world first heard Bill Monroe, Hank Williams, it's a big doggone deal. And but we played the Ryman, a couple different bluegrass concert series in 2011 and 2012, and
does that just bring a smile to your face when you get to do that?
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable to stand in the same spot where the whole country music business started, and to be heard around the world, and to be invited to be on that stage,
and to get an applause full of people coming to hear you there.
It's great.
That's special.
It's a huge blessing. It's huge. It's huge.
So when you produced this, what brought this to pass in 2021?
Miami University.
So it's the industrial strength of bluegrass, Southwestern Ohio's musical legacy.
There's a book by the same title.
And there's a music festival you put on that you produced too.
Yeah, I had a music festival for years. We rebranded it after COVID.
In Wilmington, Ohio.
Yeah, after the book and the album were a hit. Miami University, now probably 8 years ago, a decade ago, I can't remember the date, they brought together Dr. Kurt Ellison, was a history professor at Miami and passionate about bluegrass music. He brought together me and Fred Bartenstein, who's another scholar in bluegrass music, a writer and journalist. We put together a team to document Southwestern Ohio's bluegrass history. There's been so much of it happen here. We started talking earlier today about the Appalachian Migration. The Osborne brothers, the guys that sang Rocky Top. They were kids when their mom and dad moved to Dayton out of poverty in Kentucky. Their dad got a job at NCR in Dayton in the early 40s, and they first started singing on radio in Middletown, Ohio, same station my dad came 2 years later. The Osborne brothers, Larry Sparks, Jim and Jesse, even the Stanley brothers, even Flatt and Scruggs, they have a connection to Ohio's bluegrass history. Cincinnati produced some Foggy Mountain Breakdown was recorded in Cincinnati.
Wow. What year was that?
1949.
40s, yeah.
1949. Anyway, Miami University brought together a team to document Southwestern Ohio's bluegrass history. That led to a little series of lectures, and that led to a book. When I found out that Ellison and Bartenstein had worked with University of Illinois Press and a book entitled Industrial Strength Bluegrass, Southwestern Ohio's Musical Legacy, I had a collection of these lectures and all the information that we'd brought together. We included me and my son Daniel. Then I thought, well, there needs to be an album by that title. Let me get some of the marquee artists in bluegrass and roots music and country music now, and let me find a budget and produce an album that spotlights some of these songs that tell about Southwestern Ohio's bluegrass legacy. And that's what we're able to do. Miami University and some of their resources found the funding. I wanted the album to be with Smithsonian Folkways Recordings because the Smithsonian label has decades of history of recording music that is historically significant and that stays available in perpetuity. We did a digital and CD release in 21, but whatever format people can hear music on a century from now, this will be available. They'll know what bluegrass history, why Ohio's a big deal to the bluegrass genre because of this LP. I say LP because now, spring of 24, we're putting that on vinyl, and we expanded it. When I produced the album that was released in 21, 16 recordings that were made in 20 and 21. We added 7 songs out of the archives, songs by Bluegrass Hall of Fame member Red Allen, songs by the Stanley Brothers, songs featuring my dad when he was with the boys from Indiana. So it's an expanded LP edition, expanded liner notes. You're looking at the insert that comes out of that. My son Daniel wrote all the details about the history of the music and the musicians and the songs that are part of this collection.
What's Daniel? How's he going to carry on the Paul to Joe legacy here?
He's not a picker. He's not a singer. He it's a labor of love for him to share the stories of bluegrass music and to keep promoting roots music. I say roots music. He's gotten a habit of that. He produces his own broadcast on our radio network. And by the way, our radio network is streamed for years. We're at realrootsradio.com. There's a free app. It's on a lot of smartphones and tablets, and a lot of folks around the world that like what we do. There are folks still have a passion for local radio, and we very much are live and local all day in southwestern Ohio. But we play a very unique music mix, and Daniel's got a great ear. He's found a lot of songs for the radio Ramblers and for other bands that he's done publicity for, several of us. And so his ear and his passion for presenting this kind of music, it'll carry him a long way. He's picked up the producer role for our music festival, and we have produced the Southern Ohio Indoor Music Festival at the Roberts Center in Wilmington for several years. The most unsexy title you ever heard in your life. My family gave me grief over that title. So when COVID shut everything down and we didn't have a festival for at least a whole year and a half, in the meantime, I got this album produced. It was a hit. So we retooled our Bluegrass Music Festival that's held in Wilmington, Ohio, as the Industrial Strength Bluegrass Festival. And it's been a big hit. Daniel produces that. He's in demand as a journalist, interviewer, podcaster, MC. He works a lot of major bluegrass festivals and roots music events around the country. So he's got a ton of talent to do whatever he wants to.
You're a proud dad.
Oh, he's a good guy. My daughter's an RN, like her mom. So very, very blessed.
As I sat here and was this hard to put this together? I don't understand the rights business and how you can accumulate 16 songs. Was this hard to get people to say yes?
No. No, it wasn't hard to get the artist to say yes. And a good reputable record label like Smithsonian Folkways or the other record labels that I've produced stuff for and worked with through the years, they know how, if somebody's going to get paid because their song's on the album, or a publisher is going to get paid and pay the writer or the artist or whoever, all that's done decently and in order, and it is. That's why Nashville's Music City, USA. Mm-hmm. Then when I, as the producer, would call an artist and say, we're producing an album that tells about Ohio's bluegrass history, and, Jim and Jesse, they wound up Grand Ole Opry stars, longtime Bluegrass Hall of Fame members. They were from the mountains of Virginia. Their first gig on radio to be heard in a metropolitan area, they were on WPFB in Middletown, Ohio in like 1951. And so I call Grand Ole Opry members today Daly and Vincent. I've known Jamie Daly and Darren Vincent for many, many years. I said, I need you guys in studio to do a Jim and Jesse song on this album. Tell us where and when. The Isaacs are Grand Ole Opry members. They've done gospel music worldwide. Literally, the first generation, Joe and Lily Isaacs, started their family ministry living in rural Warren County up around Morrow, Ohio, 50 years ago. And their kids, Ben and Sonia and Becky, were just kids. They drugged them to churches and gospel singings absolutely everywhere. Those three kids became some of the top songwriters and record producers in Nashville over the last 25 years. And the Isaacs are in demand in bluegrass and Americana and roots music. And I told the Isaacs, I said, I want one of your dad's songs on the album. They said, we'll do a collaboration with the Oak Ridge Boys. And so we've got a great Easter song on there that's been popular in gospel and bluegrass and country music, all three. Artists were eager to participate. Hardest thing about it was we started it pre-COVID and had to finish it in the summer of 20, all the recording part, and recording studios were shut down near and far. We finally were able to find a safe way to get in and engineer it, produce it, make it all happen at a variety of different recording studios.
When I first heard you talking about this 10 minutes ago, I went, this is a production of a life well lived. You can't pull this off. if you don't have decades of engagement, experience, and leadership inside of something. When I asked the question if it was easy, this shouldn't be easy, but I did have a gut feeling he's going to say yes.
It was easy to get participation.
That's what I'm talking about.
From great artists.
But the average cat can't do that.
No. I'm very blessed to have had friendships, relationships with people in the bluegrass music industry intimately for a lifetime.
It's a life well lived, and we could sit here probably and tell stories. There is no doubt that Joe lives a life of service to others. I have zero doubt. And because those people out in the world, I see them at times that are more about them and more selfish than selfless than others. The outcome just isn't as good as what it can be. And there is no doubt to me that every day when you wake up, you're looking for people, places, and opportunities to help others. It could be your son, it could be your daughter, it could be people would not sign up for this as easy as they did if all the interactions you had over the years, if you weren't helping them do something.
Yeah. Well, it can't be all about you. You're going to have a very small world. Your world's going to be very small. It's a very small package when a man's all wrapped up in himself. There's a saying like that of some kind.
Sounds good to me.
Wrangling local radio. I've been a member of the Rotary Club in Xenia for 26 years, and service above self is the motto of Rotary International. That, along with a faith foundation, it better not be all about you. Faith says it's all about Him, and service to your community. And my community is not just 3 or 4 Ohio counties where I own the local radio stations. It's also the entire bluegrass community. And bluegrass it's a niche music. It's bigger than ever. We've got some artists that are filling arenas and playing the Tonight Show and just kicking tail. But still, it's as much community as it is industry.
Well, I just I listen to a lot of music on the app I have. I'm not like if somebody said, "What's your favorite music?" I'll tell you what, Joe, I can put on some hip hop. I'll listen to some rap every once in a while, but I love country. I can listen to some pop every once in a while if I force myself to. But there's something about bluegrass. It just makes me feel better every day.
No, there's some songs that'll make you want to jump off a bridge too.
But there's something about the music and the feeling. So much of it just makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's about negativity. It feels like it's more about good.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is. I'm not an expert at all. I'm sitting here talking to one. It just makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge variety in the context of bluegrass songs, bigger than ever these days. The old murder ballads, Ralph Stanley was a legendary figure. He made a living burying an old gal named Pretty Polly. There's an old mountain song about Polly, pretty Polly, come and take me unkind. And he kills the gal. It's a murder ballad. There's a ton of those that made it out of the Appalachian Hills into bluegrass recordings.
So maybe those wouldn't make me feel good.
No.
But maybe they still sound good. There's just something about the strings and the banjo and the fiddle. There's something about that music to me.
Good.
With some harmony, it just feels good.
I'm glad you like it. We do a lot of feel-good songs, but we do
some murdering songs too, huh?
Yeah, there's a few of those.
So what about these new guys? Like is it Tyler Childers? Is he a bluegrass type of or no?
Americana.
Okay.
Bluegrass. Billy Strings is one of the hottest bluegrass artists going right now, and Billy's bluegrass and everything else. Chris Stapleton is the top country male star right now. He started out in bluegrass.
How good is that
up in
voice?
Eastern Kentucky.
How good is that voice?
Oh, man. It just draws you right in. But he's very, very bluegrass influenced. There's a guy in this LP right here in the archival tracks we put in named Dave Evans. And listen to Dave Evans, and you'll hear a lot of Chris Stapleton influence, from old Dave Evans. Dave was from Southern Ohio, started making records and playing in bands in the Cincinnati area in the late 70s. And he sings from his guts up, and it's just killer. And you'll hear where guys like Stapleton or Travis Tritt, some of those good gritty country stars that we love. Old Dave Evans had an influence on him. Made records right here in Cincinnati.
What do we make of the music business now, where a guy like Brandon Oliver Anthony, when that song came up and just went off? I forget the name of it, but it popped off. What was the name of that song? He was working
something about Richmond.
Yeah, Richmond, north of Richmond.
Yeah,
that was it. It's country. I don't think it's bluegrass. I mean, I think it's. But what do we make now of the music world that someone? You don't have to be. It's what's happened with podcasts. It's traditional media is becoming tough to exist in.
Yeah.
What do we make about this new world of music?
I don't know. These devices that we carry around in the palm of our hand are so influential. I mentioned the name Billy Strings. Billy is a phenomenal guitar player. He's a singer. He's a songwriter. He's a showman. He goes on stage with a guitar and 4 other musicians: banjo, fiddle, upright bass, and mandolin. Your standard 5-piece bluegrass lineup, without a lot of terrestrial radio play, without a lot of mainstream radio promotion. Billy started selling out arenas. He sold out Bridgestone Arena in downtown Nashville 2 or 3 nights in a row.
That's probably 18 or 20,000 a night,
at least. And
from probably YouTube and just putting stuff out on his own, and
however he did it, he's lightning in a bottle.
Mm-hmm. You don't know what to make of it. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough for an old guy like me, who has been making records 40 years and scrambled around to get little pockets in areas across the country where there's some radio station that plays a little bit of bluegrass. If they play you, hallelujah. Billy just took over, and that's great.
So is it tough to make a decision? Do you just keep on doing the same old things, or is it a challenge? Like, man, how do we exist here? How do we thrive? How do we take the new music, and is that on your mind? What do we do? We don't want to just be eliminated here.
It is. Authenticity still works. And me and all the guys in my band, we are lifelong players, singers, songwriters, entertainers. But you try not to just do the same old, because you've got to keep creating. So thankfully, we've got new songs and new music and new recordings and try to do new things on the stage without losing our focus.
Yeah, what do we see if we go to Grayson, Kentucky on May 26th, where you guys will be? What do we see if we roll into a concert? I think it's May 26th.
Yeah.
If we roll into a concert and we listen to Joe and your radio Ramblers, what do we expect to see? Am I going to sit in a chair and just listen to some bluegrass, or is the big show happening? What's going on?
No, there's not a lot of smoke and mirrors. We're not swinging from chains and doing all this kind of stuff.
You invoked the word sexy about 20 minutes ago. I didn't.
Yeah.
So we're not getting that with Joe and the Ramblers.
No, you're getting good musicians.
Yeah.
That work well together. It's like, you try to make it like a well-oiled machine with what we do. And I lay out our stage show like a radio program. We're not going to do a whole bunch of songs that all sound the same. And there's 4, everybody in the band sings, and we do a variety of context in the show. Everybody's not going to be the same type of song, not going to be in the same key, not going to be in the same tempo. We're going to have a variety where our set is going to be delivered like a radio program, to where if you'll give us 20 minutes, you'll hear something you like. If you don't like all of it, you'll like some of it, whether it's great fiddle playing or an a cappella gospel quartet number, or a deep story song. You're going to hear a variety from the Radio Ramblers. Now, I've joked around with audiences for years and say, a good bluegrass program, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you're going to fight, you're going to kiss and make up. all this happens. And there'll be songs about mother and murder and moonshine, all wrapped up in, that winds up at the church house before you get done,
How much of a good concert is engaging and playing with the crowd, too, other than just your music?
Oh, a lot of it. A lot of it. It better be. It is for us. We play for a lot of small audiences. We don't play arenas for thousands of people. We play a lot of community theaters and small auditoriums for hundreds of people. And you need to make a connection. You got to feed off each other. And it better look like you're having the most fun in your life,
What, on the nights when you're really smiling?
Yeah.
During a concert, but also when you walk off stage. I'm sure you're giving those fist pumps and handshakes. Now, when it really goes well,
Yeah.
what happens then? When
It encourages you to get in the bus and ride 10 hours to the next one.
But you're going to do that anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we've done it our whole lives.
What's that do on I'm sure there's those moments. If it's 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, you're like, boy, that was it tonight, guys. That was a good one.
Yeah.
What happens with that? Because what I see is that happens in business. It happens when you could go on a golf outing with some friends every once in a while. When you do something with a group of people and it's just a little more special that time.
Yeah.
What happens that night? Do you get into a zone? Does it feel different? Is the crowd different? What happens when you walk? You're like, you know what? This is one of those nights, boys.
Well, a lot of it will be if the crowd is picking up what you're putting down, if the sound is good, if we play acoustic instruments, but we've got good microphones and we have a sound tech that travels with us. And if we're hearing what we want to hear and the audience is hearing something they like and you make a connection, it's very, very rewarding. It's very special. There's an adrenaline. There's a rush when they like something that we're creating. Again, it's very authentic. If you can make a mistake and they still give you a hand, that helps out too.
Feels like maybe it's just a great conversation between a band and an audience or something.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like it should be. What are you excited about in 2024? We know we're pumped about this coming out.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have the music festival again?
Fall, November. We just finished up a great festival in March. November, it's that second weekend in November. It's like 7, 8, 9, something like that in fall of 24. And we'll have an all-star lineup Thursday evening, all day Friday and Saturday at the Convention Center in Wilmington, halfway between Cincinnati and Columbus.
Right there on the west side of 71.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, right across from R&L Trucking's headquarters. The Roberts family owns that real estate. And nice. It's the best convention space in Southern Ohio. And we'll have a couple thousand people there soaking it up all weekend. And our listeners today can see industrialstrengthbluegrass.com. Industrialstrengthbluegrass.com connects you to the music festival, to the album, to the book. It's a brand that I'm thankful to continue to curate. And the LP is past and present. Current stars in bluegrass and roots music, singing songs that started, that had life given to them in Ohio. And then our archival artist added in for perspective as to from whence it came. So, and Daniel's notes inside. There's a good read in there.
What's his podcast again?
Walls of Time Bluegrass Podcast is Daniel. And it's intimate interviews with people past and present that have made bluegrass music their entire life. It's really good. He's a good interviewer.
What do you want your legacy to be? I don't say that too often because when people say it to me, I don't love the question. I don't. But
yeah, you had me buried a while ago about this life well lived so far.
Well, it is because
I could run the whole thing in the ditch before today's over with.
But it doesn't change what you've done.
No.
Does that, when I say legacy, does it matter when it all ends, when the lights go out?
A legacy of service. You mentioned that, and if people know that I did the right things for the right reasons consistently, and that I cared, I want to give everything that that my wife and my kids and my grandkids need to have the best opportunity, like I did, and that I did care about the people and not just the product. Whether it's my sponsors that have supported me on radio, the guys that have been in the band, the other artists that we've collaborated with. I'm very thankful for every opportunity that they gave me, and I gave them 100%. And I'd like to be able to look them all in the eye and say, I love you. I'm grateful for what we've accomplished together.
So it sounds like all this has already happened.
Well, I'm trying.
I think what you just explained, if it all ended tomorrow,
Yeah.
feels like that's the legacy just from our short conversation today.
Yeah.
So what else are you going to do? Because you've already done that.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't know what I'm going to do next.
I mean, Grandpa will be your best job ever, but you're still going to do some stuff around this. I mean, you're handing things off to Daniel.
Yeah, well, slowly but surely, he's doing fine. Band-wise, I've got some talented guys in the band, and we've got some new music we want to create and have ready for 24 and 25. We're going to do another gospel album. We've done 10 albums. We did a Christmas album last year for the first time. Our current Bluegrass album was #1 in the country at the end of last summer.
You're one of the only guys, if not the only one, this International Bluegrass Musicians Hall of Fame organization, the IBMC, is that correct?
IBMA,
IBMA,
International Bluegrass Music Association. The IBMA is our trade association, like the CMA is for country.
You got 4 significant awards. You're the only guy. You know that. You're the only guy that has the big 4.
I've done too much. I can't be. I'm not good enough at any one of them to make a living, so I've had to do everything.
Oh, is that how you got the awards?
Yeah, that's how I got the awards.
Is that it?
Yeah.
You didn't do anything big. They just said he's a nice guy. Let's give it to him.
Well, I'm a glutton. I'm not good enough at any one to be satisfied, so I've done it all.
An album of the year in 21, a radio broadcaster of the year in 16, an entertainer of the year in 22. I mean, I keep going. Not good at any one of them.
Well, not good enough. I couldn't. You couldn't make a good enough living just doing one thing when it's in a small world.
So
like
you had to make a
this.
living doing all of them.
Yeah. Event producer. I think that's on there too.
Radio, musician, entertainer, producer. I tell you what, each one of those would be a career.
I'm very fortunate.
I'm impressed. You sitting here at 57 or 58 years old, that you've done all this. You can talk about the wife and having just a great wife and what she was done for you and how she supported you. You had ups and downs in 94 and 95, and you buy radio stations. You talk about your 2 children who are now grown adults.
Yeah.
And you're talking about having a grandkid and still putting out albums. Man, it's a good life.
I've been very, very blessed.
And you've worked hard.
Yeah, very blessed, very fortunate. Fortunate to be in good health, and that's something I don't take for granted. I'll be 60 next year, and I don't have any major health issues. It could change in 10 minutes, but I'm very grateful.
Does it feel like it went by like that?
Yeah, it does. It's hard to believe. I look back at landmarks, whether it big family events when your kids are born, or big events when you got to play this show or that show or put out this record, or things that you accomplish, and it has went so quick, and life just gets amazingly more. The speed continues to pick up as you get older. It's hard to believe it's 2024. It's hard to believe it was just 4 years ago. We're trying to figure out what the heck to do because the world shut down with a pandemic.
And 4 years just go by like that.
Yeah, I was scrounging around trying to find a recording studio. I got to finish an album. I don't care if there's a pandemic.
Did you create one?
Got work to
Did
do.
you kind of build your own?
Yeah, I don't have a recording studio, but we found a way to get it done.
There you go.
I found the right guys.
Isn't that business and life? Isn't that just life? You just find a way to get it done.
You find a way to get it done.
If someone wants to pick up an instrument and become a musician at 15 or 18 or 20, where the heck do they start? If you're on that mic and they said, Mr. Mullins, I want to be a musician.
I said, don't quit your day job. First thing I tell them. It's just music. It's not life. Get an education. Do something to go along with it. And then if you're good enough to make it a career, you'll be one of the fortunate few. These days, through the internet, through YouTube, through Skype, through Zoom, there are great musicians that offer lessons at any level. They can help a beginner get started. They can help a professional reinvent their technique. Some of my, friends in the music industry who are phenomenal musicians, fiddlers and banjo players and mandolin artists, when they're not on the road or in the studio, they schedule time to help teach. But I always tell a young kid, don't make yourself miserable trying to learn how to play an instrument. Keep it out of the case. And it's better to play, for 10 or 15 minutes, 6 or 8 times a day than it is to sit down for 2 hours and torture yourself and everybody else in the house.
All those stories of the parents saying, "Man, when are you going to stop playing those drums? This is not good." All right, final question here. I'm glad I didn't let you ask them, because we started this out by you asking me the first question. I had to start out and go on a rant for 4.5 minutes. If you can only listen to one musician the rest of your life, who would it be?
If I could only listen, oh my gosh, that's a terrible hard question, because I
That's
can
my
give you a
job.
list of musicians that absolutely inspire me.
I'm not talking about the 25 that you got to make sure you name when you get an award and you wrote down all the things, and I got to make sure I recognize everybody so I don't upset anybody. If your ears, that brain, could only listen to one the rest of your life.
One musician, just one guy playing an instrument.
That's it.
Wow.
Just one.
Wow.
I did something good here. These 40 years, all this experience, I got him.
Well, I got so many musicians rolling around in my
Only one.
head.
Doesn't have to be your favorite. It
Only
might
one.
just only one. And your good days, your bad days,
Yeah.
when your grandchild's going to be born,
Yeah.
only one.
Listen to one musician all the time. That's really tough for me, because I've soaked up and tried to absorb and learn from 3 or 4 generations of phenomenal musicians, from Bill Monroe and Earl Scruggs and Ralph Stanley, the first generation creators of bluegrass music, to these days, everybody needs to hear a guy named Michael Cleveland. He's one of the most inspiring fiddlers in the history of American recordings and performance. Michael is phenomenal. Jerry Douglas is another musician that everybody's got to hear. He plays the resophonic guitar, the dobro, which entered bluegrass in the mid-'50s. He's been one of the greatest musicians in the history of American recordings.
So you end up doing what I just said. You walked up and you made sure you said everybody, so when you say the one, everybody's on. Is this an impossible question?
It's an impossible question for me, because I'm a banjo guy, but I love so many other great musicians. Buddy Emmons has been gone for several years. He was one of the greatest steel guitar players in the history of American recordings. Not only recording with country pioneers like Ernest Tubb, but worked for the Everly Brothers and Linda Ronstadt, recorded every kind of music imaginable with a steel guitar.
You disappoint me, Joe.
I draw from all these people.
So there can't be just one.
There can't be just one. There can't be just one. If there's one act that I listen to as much or more than anything, the Osborne brothers, they're both passed on now, but they're the fat cat daddies of industrial strength bluegrass. Bobby Osborne was the greatest vocalist and a mandolin artist, and Sonny Osborne, his brother, was one of the greatest harmony singers and one of the most inventive banjo artists. And I got to see both of those guys my entire life until they both just passed over the last few years. And their career was country and bluegrass music at its absolute greatest. They had one of the longest partnerships, one of the longest recording careers in bluegrass music. Their catalog of music, I don't get tired of hearing it. From the early 50s all the way through the mid-2000s, the music those guys made is among my favorites.
As we wrap up here, I'm sitting here like, you know what? It took me an hour and a half to fully get Joe Mullins. You are an accumulation of all these people that you've had the fortunate opportunity to be around consistently throughout your life. You just named all these people. You've been in their presence. You've listened to them. You've been with them. You've been in the vicinity. And you've created that. Your dad created it, then you created it, and you created a radio station. And But the guy that's sitting here today, well, that's tough to reproduce because you are a product of all of these people and situations and opportunities that you've been in.
Nobody wants to be me. We don't want to reproduce that. A whole lot of beans and taters and pizza too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, I look at all this and I'm like, man, what a, and I said a wife well lived. Just what a wife though, man. These 50s, it's awesome. It is.
Oh, so very fortunate.
Yeah.
If you
put yourself around the right people, man.
Yeah, and try to learn something from all of them. These days, I'm learning a lot from the younger guys. The guys in my band and Daniel, my son, I learn new ways to think about things, learn new ways to do things, draw inspiration. You know, all the guys I grew up inspired by are all passed away. I've got some contemporaries that I still draw a lot of inspiration from, great vocalists and great players and great leaders at our church. But the younger generation that have a passion, they got a fire in their soul to create good music, to play an instrument, to write a song. If they got an ear to hear things that I haven't heard before that I need to pay attention to, I still try to learn something from those people. We learn something from our elders.
But you can learn something from the young
but
folks
I'm gonna be an elder pretty soon, so I got to learn something from the younger folks.
What a great perspective. I think so often when we're young, we probably don't listen to the people that have come before enough, and then we transition into later generations, and we become the older folks, and then we're not listening to the people that are coming next, man, that have that different perspective, that are listening and hearing not just music but the world differently.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they're seeing something. Maybe there's a little something that we can grow and learn from. I think that's just awesome. If you can be in your 50s and hit 60 and listen to those 25-year-old cats coming up and not judge them, right? Not jump to conclusions. Say, let me just go in here and listen a little bit. Man, there's a lot to that, just about life, business, music.
I try to do that, and I was inspired to do that a lot. I was the chairman of the board of directors for the International Bluegrass Music Association a few years ago for a couple of terms, and when that convention would come together, the convention has been from Louisville to Nashville to Raleigh, North Carolina, but you're bringing together 100,000 people from around the globe that are inspired by bluegrass music. And you can sit in the lobby of the convention center and see 12 and 15-year-old kids just shred an instrument. And you can be inspired and you can learn something. And then you can sit down with a guy that was writing great songs 60 years ago that we still love, and he can tell stories that still inspire you. That's good stuff. That's something so you try to learn to appreciate somebody's talent at whatever level they are and learn something from them. And there's also if there's a negative side to it, you can learn what not to do from a lot of people too.
Yeah. Your attitude determines your altitude, right?
Yeah, I say that a lot. And some days my attitude is not what it's supposed to be.
So guess what happens? Your altitude's a little lower that day.
Yeah. You can flounder on days like that.
I think that's okay. I think we have to be willing to accept that part.
Yeah.
Perfection is a very unreasonable and misguided idea.
It's a problem for a lot of musicians. Perfection's hard to come by. Perfection might not mean that every note is exactly where it's supposed to be, but that the passion in the performance was captivating.
There you go. I think you just care about doing a great job.
You don't want to, in the pursuit of perfection, you can lose your soul.
And you can lose a lot of good moments.
You sure can.
Right?
You sure can.
Perfection also, if you obtain it, it's so short-lived because there's something else then.
Yep.
That's why I think perfection's impossible. Once you figure out that right note or that right harmony or something, once you get there, you level up, well, there's another level to it then.
Oh, yeah.
Everything in life.
Absolutely.
So perfection's impossible. Huh.
It is.
It is impossible. I enjoyed this today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. I think you might sell a couple vinyls from this.
Well,
maybe two.
Yeah.
You might get one person to attend a country music festival. But I hope everybody goes out there and checks out your radio stations. I think that's just tremendous. It's Real Roots Radio.
Real Roots Radio. It's the most unique thing you'll find on the air. When I'm not on the road, I'm still on the air most days 1 to 3 Eastern time. Myself, I produce an hour called Hymns from the Hills. It's gospel music. It's very bluegrass influenced. There's a lot of bluegrass past and present on there on the sacred side of things. Then I do a 1-hour broadcast every afternoon, 2 o'clock, called the Banjo Show. And it's about half and half classic and current bluegrass.
Is that thoroughly produced, or do you just sit down and let's go?
I sit down and do it live when I'm there. And same way, I've got a big roster of sponsors that are part of that broadcast, and I do live ad-lib endorsement commercials.
So it's like a NASCAR race every time you're on there. Boy, they got patches everywhere. Their cars, their uniforms, their helmets. They're talking about sponsors the whole time.
Well, if you hear me on the radio or my broadcast for 15 minutes, you don't hear a commercial, I'm going in the hole.
You're not making money. Somebody's paying you for that.
I got to talk about somebody selling Chevrolet trucks or furniture or insurance or shoes or the meat market or whatever. And I enjoy that too. I enjoy storytelling.
You love it, don't you? That hour or two that you get, you love that.
Most days. After this many years, there's some days when you got to phone it in. I'm being honest with you.
What do you
and the
do? What do
audience.
you do on those days?
You grit your teeth and you still do your best. You try to resurrect the right attitude.
Thank you for coming in. This is awesome. I think I'll jump in here. Your music's good though. It's good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Probably the most unique out of your nearly 100 interviews, as far as the context of what I do.
There's a lot to learn though. There's a ton to learn.
Well, yeah, you didn't ever dream somebody could make a living playing a banjo or playing hillbilly music on a local radio station.
I didn't ever dream we'd be sitting on my podcast, but here's what I think. I think, no, when you've done the amount of things that you've done, it's I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but there's some intelligence I've built in 45 years around being around a lot of smart people. And that's been important for me. Get in rooms where there's a lot of smart people, you're going to learn a lot.
Yep.
And then what that's allowed me to do, that's allowed me to be pretty predictive. When I'm around people, I know if they're doing some stuff. And there's no doubt you're doing some things. And it's exciting to see. I think it's good for me to, spread out our horizons and listen to more folks and what's going on. And it's exciting for me because if I listen into your broadcast, there's probably something I'm going to learn about interviewing.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed.
Yeah. Have an awesome May. You guys are busy in May.
Yes, we are.
Playing some music. This should be awesome. Have another great festival in November. Yeah. And much success to Daniel and what he's building and Real Roots Radio and his podcast and stuff. So you guys are good stuff. And you're a lucky guy and your wife is a lucky lady. Your new grandchild, he's going to have a a special granddad, I think.
Oh, I've been looking forward to that.
Is it here? Is it, if it's a boy or
We don't know yet. We aren't that far along yet. Daniel and his wife are expecting in November, and we're extremely excited about that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Have an awesome day.